Amid the vast and icy ocean, in just 5 short days, daring fishermen plunge into the hunt for 100,000 pounds of red snapper, the precious gem of the sea that can bring in 1.5 million USD every wave, every gust of wind, every movement of the fish school is the key that decides success or failure. This is not just a fishing trip, but a life-and-death race between man and the sea, where every moment is worth its weight in gold. The 5-day race on cold waters. Not everyone understands why a mere 5-day voyage at sea can turn into $1 million game. But for fishermen who have spent their lives eating waves and speaking the language of the wind, the figure of 1.5 million US dollars from 100,000 pounds of red snapper is not just a reward, but proof of skill, experience, and the ability to read the ocean like an open book. In the United States, especially in the Gulf of Mexico and along the Atlantic coast, the red snapper fishery has become a high-pressure race, not only between man and nature, but also between boats, where every hour of delay can mean losing everything. In the long-standing marine economy, people still say, whoever masters the rhythm of the sea masters their own wallet. And that rhythm is not something easily read. Offshore, the ocean is nothing like the calm postcards from travel brochures. It changes color, changes pace with every gust of wind, every deep current. Fishermen know that red snapper are not easy to find. They never stay still, always moving with the currents, with temperature, and sometimes appearing only in one golden spot for a few short hours. Miss that moment, and they will have to burn hundreds of gallons of fuel and spend hours trying to pick up the trail again. The difficulty is not knowing where the fish are, but knowing where they will be in the next few hours. This is the skill of reading the sea's map with the naked eye and intuition, combined with data from sonar devices and modern GPS systems. But even technology cannot replace the experience accumulated over many seasons at sea. A veteran fisherman can stand on deck, take a breath of wind, and tell whether the deep water is warming or cooling, a detail that may seem small but determines the movement of the entire fish school. For that reason, every trip is like a giant chess match, where the player must calculate each move to save time and fuel. The price of fuel for commercial fishing vessels in the U.S. has risen sharply in recent years, adding more pressure to each voyage. Just one day of missing the rhythm, and fuel costs can eat away all expected profits. That's why when the clock strikes departure hour, every minute at sea is translated into cash, and mistakes are never allowed to be repeated. American fishermen are well accustomed to the fierce competitiveness of the global seafood market. They know full well that out there, ports in Japan, South Korea, or Europe are also awaiting shipments of fresh red snapper. If they return late, the market could be taken first, and prices will drop. Each time a boat docks, the price of fish reflects not only its quality, but also the speed and timing of getting the goods into the supply chain. In the context of seafood trade agreements between the U.S. and many countries being pressured by political fluctuations, such as tariff disputes or export quotas, a successful trip carries not only economic significance for the fishermen, but also serves as a fragment of the national maritime economy. In southern coastal states like Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, red snapper fishing has become a livelihood pillar for tens of thousands of families. Each fishing season not only brings income, but also sustains an entire support system, from processing plants and cold storage facilities to transport fleets and even waterfront restaurants. Just one poor season at sea can send economic ripples outward like a domino effect, impacting the entire community. Therefore, the success of a red snapper hunt is not merely a story told on the deck, but also the story of a small economy clinging to the ocean. The dry numbers in financial reports, 100,000 pounds of fish, 1.5 million US dollars in revenue, hide behind them the sweat, sleepless nights, and the ability to steer a boat through rough seas to chase a fish school moving as fast as market news on the stock exchange. There is no room for distraction because the ocean waits for no one, and the competitors are only a few nautical miles away. In this world, the faster one wins, and the reward is not only boxes full of fish, but also the pride of returning to port with victory in hand. That 5-day race on the cold waters is therefore not just a journey for survival, but also a test of intellect, courage, and endurance. And for those who have chosen to bind their lives to the sea, each successful voyage is another promise. Tomorrow they will set out again, continue to read the ocean's rhythm, and continue to search for the golden moment amid the endless waves. The silent home beneath the deep sea. If you stand on the deck of a boat, looking out over the endless blue and thinking that red snapper are just bright crimson spots drifting in the water, that's a sweet misconception. In reality, the journey to find them begins with understanding the place they call home. A world submerged tens of meters underwater, where faint light and harsh currents have shaped their unique survival instincts. Red snapper do not choose open waters. They seek out coral reefs, rocky ledges, or even sunken shipwrecks that have rested quietly on the seafloor for decades. These places are both natural fortresses and endless banquets of plankton, shrimp, squid, and small fish, their sources of life. Marine biologists have recorded that the Gulf of Mexico and along the Atlantic coast resemble a map of thousands of interconnected shelter points. Each point is a cluster of coral reefs or a large rock formation, spaced anywhere from a few hundred meters to several nautical miles apart. Red snapper use these points as rest stops during their ceaseless movements. Knowing the location, depth, and environmental conditions of each stop is the key for fishermen to stay one step ahead of the fish. Because once the school leaves, no one knows when they will return. The preferred depth range of red snapper is from about 10 meters to over 200 meters. In shallower waters, they are easily disturbed by strong waves and bright light. But in exchange, food sources are more abundant during the summer, when smaller organisms bloom. In deeper waters, they find more peace from predators, but must accept scarcer food and colder temperatures. Moving between these shallow and deep layers is a survival strategy deeply ingrained in their instincts. For fishermen, this means constantly adjusting fishing techniques. When the fish are near shore, they can use smaller boats to save fuel. When the fish retreat deep in winter, only larger vessels capable of withstanding rough seas and equipped with the right gear dare to follow. It's not just about shelter. The seasonal migration habits of red snapper are also economic keys. Every year, as surface temperatures rise in late spring and early summer, the fish begin leaving deep waters, moving closer to shore to spawn. This is the golden opportunity period when fish density on nearshore reefs increases significantly, making fishing easier. But when winter winds bring cold water and large waves, red snapper immediately retreat to deep waters, where storms can't reach. For fishermen, this shift is like a giant biological clock, and whoever can read its rhythm will control the catch. However, the habitat of red snapper is not unchanging. Global climate change is affecting ocean temperatures, currents, and even their reproductive rates. Some coral reefs have been bleached, losing biodiversity, forcing the fish to migrate farther in search of food and shelter. This makes fishermen's journeys more complicated, requiring them not only to rely on traditional experience, but also to learn how to use satellite data, current models, and sea temperature forecasts. Beneath the waves, red snapper live as a tightly knit community. They don't swim alone but gather in large groups, a strategy to reduce the risk of predation. Whenever one individual detects danger, the whole school reacts instantly, changing direction in a split second. And because of this communal behavior, once a school is located, Fishermen can hope to haul in hundreds of fish within a small area. But at the same time, just one wrong signal, a loud noise, a net pulled too harshly, and the school will scatter and vanish as if it had never been there. Interestingly, the homes of red snapper on the seafloor are sometimes man-made. Artificial reef projects, using steel frames, concrete, and even deliberately sunk ships, have become magnets for fish schools. In the U.S., many coastal states have turned the creation of artificial reefs into a strategy that both preserves ecosystems and supports fisheries. For red snapper, these new structures are nothing less than a chain of new fortresses to live and reproduce in. For fishermen, these are new coordinates to be remembered and exploited. Understanding the habitat and movement patterns of red snapper is not just biological knowledge. It's the foundation of a multi-billion-dollar marine economy. Because only by knowing where their home is, when they are there, and why they leave, can humans turn a vast ocean into a real opportunity. And in this game, whoever knows more goes farther, bringing back more, both fish and profit. The chase rhythm on the ocean. Once they've grasped the address and habits of the red snapper, the next step for American fishermen is to turn that knowledge into action. A tactical hunting campaign where every hour and every minute at sea can decide tens of thousands of dollars. In reality, catching red snapper is not just about casting nets and waiting. It is a chain of interconnected decisions, from choosing the departure time, course, and type of equipment, to how to react when a school of fish suddenly appears. On the deck, the atmosphere before setting sail always carries a special tension. The captain and crew gather around the electronic chart, which displays data on currents, water temperature, and even sonar traces of large fish schools. Each dot on the screen could be the signal of a million-dollar opportunity, or just a small, stray school. The helmsman must rely on both experience and intuition to choose a direction. Being off by just a few nautical miles can mean missing an entire day's catch. The hunt begins as soon as the boat reaches the spot. The sonar system scans the seabed continuously, emitting steady ping sounds, each echo bringing new information about movement beneath the surface. When the screen shows a distinctive color mass, the sign of a gathering red snapper school, the order "drop the nets" is given. Steel cables start screeching, pulling massive nets sliding down deep. Each net drop is a gamble on time and location. If the fish change direction in just a few minutes, the entire haul could come up empty. What makes red snapper such a difficult target is not only their speed, but also their collective reaction ability. When sensing danger, the school can turn and scatter in unpredictable patterns. That's why fishermen must calculate precisely so that the nets close at the right time and place, covering most of the school. Failure means losing many more hours chasing, while fuel, manpower, and time are all limited resources. During the chase, weather is always a variable not to be underestimated. A sudden tropical storm can completely shatter the plan. Strong winds and high waves not only threaten safety, but also make operating equipment dangerous. Therefore, captains often have to read the weather like a book, predicting changes in wind, clouds, and pressure to adjust course in time. Many times, they are forced to leave a promising area simply because they see a storm forming on the horizon. When the nets are hauled up, it's the most suspenseful moment. The cranes roar, lifting tons of water and fish onto the deck. The brilliant red glow of the snappers mixes with the cheers of the crew, creating a scene both powerful and vivid. But that joy doesn't last long. The sorting team immediately works at full speed to get the fish into cold storage, keeping the meat at top quality. In this industry, just a few hours of delay can cause selling prices to drop sharply. Alongside the fishermen's excitement comes the pressure from fishery regulations. In the U.S., Each vessel is only allowed to catch red snapper within a set quota, strictly enforced to protect long-term resources. This creates a paradox. Even when encountering a large school, fishermen cannot overfish, forcing them to choose carefully which hauls are worth dropping the nets for. This is when strategy and patience become key weapons, as a hasty decision can burn their quota before the season ends. In addition, the market also directly affects the chase rhythm. When demand spikes, such as before holidays or tourist season, the price of red snapper can soar, prompting fishing boats to rush to sea. But when supply suddenly exceeds demand, prices drop sharply, forcing fishermen to consider whether to keep fishing or wait for a better time. Every decision is a combination of market information, experience, and risk tolerance. The chase rhythm on the ocean, therefore, is not simply a journey to find and catch. It is a strategic game where every turn of the wheel, every net drop, and every storm avoidance decision is a matter of survival. Beneath the grandeur of those bright red hulls lies an entire world of constant calculation and adaptation. One that has made red snapper fishing in the U.S. one of the most brutal yet alluring symbols of the global marine economy. Steps back to shore and the race on land. When the deck is piled high with blocks of bright red snapper, the journey at sea may seem complete, but in reality, that's only half the way. The other half, and no less intense, is the race on land, where time, quality, and the market become the three variables determining the final profit. As soon as the last catch is put into the freezing hold, the captain orders the bow turned toward the port. The engines roar, slicing through the waves, because every passing hour can decrease the value of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of goods. In the engine room, engineers constantly check the temperature of the freezing hold. Just a few degrees off, and the fish meat's quality will drop, causing the price to plunge. This meticulousness is not just experience, but also a form of survival instinct deeply ingrained in American fishing culture. However, speed is not the only factor. On the way back, the crew must also coordinate with brokers and distributors to lock in prices before docking. Some captains choose to sell directly to major fish markets, like those in New Orleans or Miami, where prices depend heavily on public auctions. Others sign contracts directly with high-end restaurants or supermarket chains, ensuring an outlet but requiring commitments on fish quality and size. Each choice is a gamble on profit, and only those who are sharp to market fluctuations can keep the advantage. When the boat touches the pier, the fishing port becomes bustling. Refrigerated trucks line up waiting, and workers quickly move the fish down for delivery. Each tray of red snapper is checked for size, color, and freshness before being sealed. This is the final decisive step, because just one shipment rated poorly can cost the entire trip tens of % in profit. Fishermen understand that, to maintain long-term credibility, they cannot trade quality for quantity. Behind it all is fierce competition among fishing vessels. If just one fleet docks a few hours earlier with a similar haul, the market can instantly be flooded with goods, causing prices to drop. That's why many boats are equipped with satellite communication systems so they can update port conditions while still offshore, then decide whether to head back immediately or linger to find another haul. This is a kind of commercial strategy at sea, where speed, information, and market strategy blend into a game of intellect. The steps back to shore are also when the local community benefits. The red snapper fishery not only supports the crews, but also provides jobs for thousands working in ports, processing plants, transport companies, and supply chains. A successful season can pump millions of dollars into the coastal economy, boosting restaurants, hotels, and tourism services. Conversely, if bad weather or a sluggish market hits, negative impacts spread quickly, throwing many households into hardship. All these factors make red snapper fishing a tightly linked chain of operations, where the journey home is not just the end, but the final acceleration. Each trip is its own story, sometimes radiant with laughter and record-breaking numbers, sometimes full of regret over falling prices or poor yields. But regardless of the outcome, when the boat is moored and the deck washed free of sea salt, everyone knows that in just a few days they will head out again, continuing the endless cycle between man, the ocean, and the market, keeping the fire of the trade and facing future challenges. After the days of straining at sea and the breathless race on shore, when the engines have gone silent and the pier returns to its quiet state, people finally have time to sit down and think about the road ahead. The red snapper fishing trade, seemingly revolving only around setting out to sea, returning to port, selling the catch, is in fact a link in a complex economic, social, environmental picture, where every change leaves a lasting mark. Keeping the fire of the trade alive depends not only on skill and health, but also on steadfastness in the face of harsh changes. Veteran generations of fishermen often recall that decades ago the sea was vast, and fish were so abundant that just a few hours of casting nets would fill the hold. But now, natural yields have shifted, the weather is more unpredictable, and marine resource management regulations have grown increasingly strict. These changes require fishermen to both preserve tradition and be ready to adapt to new science and technology. One of the greatest challenges today is the problem of sustainability. The U.S. federal and state governments enforce strict fishing quotas, limiting the number of days at sea, as well as the weight and size of fish allowed to be caught. These regulations protect long-term resources, but at the same time put many fishing boats in a dilemma: either accept reduced yields to comply, or risk exceeding quotas with the danger of heavy fines. In this context, crews who invest in good preservation techniques, selectively catch fish that meet standards, and seek high-value markets can still maintain profits even when yields are no longer what they used to be. The future of the red snapper industry also depends greatly on human factors. Younger generations are less eager for work that is hard, dangerous, and highly dependent on weather. To attract them, many coastal communities have partnered with vocational schools, organizing crew training programs that provide knowledge on safety, financial management, and modern equipment operation. This is a way to pass on the fire and build a next generation strong enough to shoulder the traditional trade, yet able to use technology to increase efficiency and reduce risks. Another factor shaping the future is the global connection of the seafood market. Just a small change in import demand from Japan, Europe, or China can instantly cause red snapper prices in the U.S. to fluctuate. This both opens up opportunities to access new markets and places fishermen into the whirlpool of international competition. Those who clearly understand consumer trends and are willing to improve products, from primary processing to premium packaging or producing frozen filet for export, will have a major advantage in this new game. But perhaps most important is still the invisible bond between humans and the sea. For many fishermen, each trip offshore is not just a means of livelihood, but also a way to keep a piece of their community's soul. The feeling of seeing the sunrise shining on the deck, hearing the sound of waves lapping against the hull, and hauling in nets full of bright red fish. These are moments that nurture pride and the will to cling to the sea. No matter how many economic, political, or environmental changes they face, they still believe that as long as there is the sea and fish, this trade will live on, and the story of conquering red snapper will continue to be written through each season of waves and storms. Long-term vision on the open sea. If in previous generations, the story of American fishermen was tied to going to sea today, to live tomorrow, now the vision must go much further. reaching 10, even dozens of years ahead. The red snapper industry cannot survive on manpower and luck alone. It requires strategy, cooperation, and a fresh economic political mindset to stand firm against global waves. Long-term vision first comes from proactively responding to climate change. Oceanographic research shows that currents, water temperatures, and marine ecosystems are changing rapidly, directly affecting the migration routes of red snapper. In the past, a familiar area could guarantee stable yields for many years, but now that is no longer certain. Fishing fleets are forced to combine satellite data, fish-finding technology, and real-world experience to continuously adjust their routes. Those who can predict and move early will gain the advantage, not only in catch volume, but also in reducing fuel consumption and operating costs. But long-term vision is not just at sea, it's also on land. Once the fish are in the hold, the commercial journey truly begins. Many U.S. ports have realized they cannot rely solely on selling fresh fish immediately. They invest in processing plants, cold storage facilities, and online supply chains, helping products maintain high quality and reach the global market in the shortest possible time. This shift transforms once small fishing communities into modern seafood trade hubs, attracting investors and creating more jobs beyond the shore. Politically, long-term vision means knowing how to stand firm at the negotiating table. The red snapper industry is influenced not only by federal regulations, but also by international trade agreements, environmental conservation policies, and strict export standards. A shipment can be returned simply for violating sustainable fishing regulations or lacking a certificate of origin. Therefore, fishermen's associations, processors, and local governments have learned to work together, both complying with the law and protecting the industry's interests, avoiding having their voice drowned out in global negotiations. Another key element of long-term vision is investment in people. Technology can assist, but skills and spirit still determine survival. Many scholarship programs and startup funds for the fishing industry have been established, encouraging ambitious young people to return to the trade, but in a new version, where they are sea entrepreneurs rather than just deckhands. They know how to use social media to market products, build their own red snapper brand, and negotiate directly with international customers. Long-term vision also requires community cohesion. A healthy port cannot rely only on a few successful boats. It needs an entire ecosystem of fishermen, mechanics, fishing gear suppliers, processing workers, and logistics services. Each person in this chain is a link, and if one link is weak, the whole system falters. Communities that understand this often invest in healthcare, education, and infrastructure to retain residents and create conditions for the fishing industry to grow sustainably. Finally, long-term vision is understanding that the sea belongs to no one alone. Red snappers swim across many waters, influenced by many nations. Preserving long-term resources means international cooperation, data sharing, and honoring common conservation commitments. This is not only a responsibility to the world, but also an insurance policy for the future of upcoming voyages. With such vision, the red snapper industry in the U.S. will not only be the story of short fishing trips, but a long-term journey where each wave is seen as part of a bigger picture. A picture that, if painted skillfully, will remain vibrant for generations to come. Heritage and future. If foresight is the compass guiding the American red snapper industry through the waves, then heritage is the lifeblood that nourishes the spirit and identity of the next generation. On every dock, in the stories told at dinner tables, or in the eyes of old fishermen with silver hair, fishing is not just a livelihood. It is living history, a pride passed down through generations. The heritage of the red snapper trade is not only recorded in numbers of catch or commercial value, but also deeply embedded in the memories of coastal communities. It is the bountiful seasons tied to cheers of joy when boats return, the foggy mornings when fishermen leave home, leaving behind blessings for safety. This heritage is the salty scent of sea wind, the creak of the gangplank leading from pier to boat, the image of calloused hands gripping the mooring rope, all forming a unique cultural identity that no other industry can replicate. But heritage is not meant to be locked away in a museum. It must live and grow. To achieve this, the red snapper industry must find ways to connect the past with the future. Community education programs, living fishing museums, or annual red snapper festivals are effective bridges. They help the younger generation understand that the fish on their plate is not merely a commodity, but the result of an entire chain of labor, experience, and tradition. Once they understand that, they will value it and have the motivation to preserve it. However, preserving heritage in the context of globalization is not easy. Commercial pressure forces businesses to constantly innovate, sometimes pushing traditional methods into oblivion. Here, the skill lies in preserving core values such as sustainability, respect for the sea, and team spirit, while still adopting modern technology and business strategies. A successful red snapper brand in the international market does not necessarily have to abandon traditional fishing. It can turn that very practice into a competitive advantage by proving to customers that its products come from responsible and superior quality sources. Heritage is also the thread that binds the community together. When a fisherman succeeds, he often does not keep the benefit to himself, but reinvests in the port, supports colleagues, or contributes to scholarship funds for fishermen's children. This spirit of riding the waves together not only helps the community survive hard times, but also builds a tight-knit support network where everyone feels part of something bigger. In political and economic terms, heritage is also a form of soft power. An industry with a rich history and strong culture will have a significant voice in defending its interests. When lawmakers or international partners recognize the value of heritage, they see not just a trade, but a piece of America's identity, something that offers a clear advantage in negotiations over quotas, tariffs, or conservation regulations. Looking to the future, heritage will only be truly sustainable if it is passed down proactively. That requires not only telling old stories, but also creating opportunities for the new generation to experience, work, and innovate within the very industry itself. By doing so, heritage will not be confined to the past, but will become the foundation for bold steps into the future. When a fishing community combines foresight with a strong heritage, they not only steer their vessel through present storms, but also shape the course for the long journey ahead. And then, every voyage to sea will not merely be an act of survival, but a continuation of history, writing the next chapter of a story that the ocean began long ago.